Elizabeth laughed as she held the deed to the beachfront house. I stood quietly, holding the papers for the old family farmland, trying not to show my frustration. My name is Olivia Parker, and at 35, I was watching my stepsister take what she thought was the best part of our grandmother's inheritance. She looked proud, just like our mother, who smirked from across the room. "Oh, don't be upset, Olivia," my stepmother Marianne said with fake sympathy. "At least you got something, even if it's just dirt." She and Elizabeth exchanged smug glances, like they always did. I remembered spending summers on that farmland with Gran, helping her in a garden and listening to stories about how much Grandpa loved the land. "The land speaks to those who listen," she used to say with a knowing smile. Elizabeth scrolled through her phone, excited. "The beachfront house will make a great rental. I can charge $2,000 a night. What are you going to do with your land, Olivia? Grow corn?" I carefully put the deed in my bag. "I have plans," I said, thinking of Gran's last words to me. "The greatest treasures aren't always seen by greedy eyes." "You should sell," Marian added. "That land will cost too much to maintain. Your father and I think." "My father?" I cut her off. "The man you convinced to skip this will reading because you promised to handle everything fairly." Marian's smile faltered. "He trusts me. Besides, Elizabeth knows real estate. The beach house is worth much more than that land." 10 times more," Elizabeth corrected. "I already have agents begging to list it." I stood up. "If you'll excuse me, I have a property to check on." "Don't work too hard," Elizabeth called. "I hear farming is great exercise. Maybe you'll finally lose those last 10 pounds. I ignored her and drove to the farmland. The winding roads brought back memories of childhood. The old wooden gates still creaked, and the sun cast long shadows over the fields. At the barn, I opened Gran's last letter. My hands shook as I read. "My dearest Olivia, if you're reading this, you have the farmland and Elizabeth has the beach house. Don't worry, my smart girl. You always listened when I talked about your grandfather's work. Remember those summers you spent helping him with surveys? They weren't just games. Your grandfather was a geological engineer. He spent years studying this land. In the barn, behind the blue tractor, you'll find a locked chest. The key is with this letter. Inside are his maps and research. This land isn't just dirt, it's your grandfather's legacy. He chose you for it long ago. Trust your instincts. Patience reveals what greed conceals. All my love, Gran." A small brass key fell from the envelope. My heart raced as I hurried to the barn. The chest was exactly where she said. Inside were stacks of maps and documents. As I spread them out on the floor, my eyes widened. Grandpa's research suggested something incredible lay beneath this land. I quickly pulled out my phone and started looking for a geological survey company. 3 days later, I sat across from James Anderson, a lead geologist. He studied Grandpa's notes with growing excitement. "Miss Parker," he said, looking up in surprise, "these surveys are detailed. Your grandfather discovered something important. Would you like us to do a modern survey?" I thought of Elizabeth's smug face, Marianne's arrogance, and Gran's wise words. "Yes," I said, smiling. "Let's find out exactly what my grandfather knew." Elizabeth thought she won with the beach house, but soon she would realize my worthless land held something far more valuable. Patience reveals what greed conceals, and this was just the beginning. The next month passed in a blur of activity. Pioneer Survey Corps' team became a regular presence on the farmland, their equipment dotting the fields Elizabeth had so quickly dismissed. I kept everything quiet, following Gran's wisdom about patience. Then came the call that changed everything. "Miss Parker." James Anderson's voice was barely containing his excitement. "We need you at the site immediately. There's something you have to see." I arrived to find a cluster of geologists huddled around their equipment, talking in animated whispers. James rushed over, clutching a stack of reports. "We've confirmed your grandfather's theories," he announced, spreading out several detailed charts. "Miss Parker, you're sitting on one of the largest oil deposits discovered in the region in the last 50 years. The preliminary estimates suggest, well, let's just say your worthless farmland is worth significantly more than any beachfront property." I stood there, letting the news sink in. All those summers helping Grandpa with his special projects. All those mysterious smiles Gran would share with him, they knew, they'd known all along. How soon before this becomes public knowledge? I asked, thinking about Elizabeth and Marianne's inevitable reaction. We've already had interest from several major oil companies, James replied. Word travels fast in this industry. I'd expect calls within the week. Right on cue, my phone buzzed. Elizabeth's number flashed on the screen. I declined the call, watching as 3 more came in rapid succession. Then came the text messages. Why are there survey trucks on your property? Call me immediately. Does this have something to do with what Gran's letter said? I smiled, remembering how quickly Elizabeth had dismissed the sealed letter Gran had left me, calling it probably just sentimental garbage. Now suddenly she was interested. The next morning, I arrived at my office to find Marianne and Elizabeth waiting in the lobby. Elizabeth had traded her usual designer casual wear for a sophisticated business suit, while Marianne wore her most charming smile. Olivia, darling, Marianne purred, stepping forward. We've been trying to reach you. As family, we're naturally concerned about all this activity on your property. Really? I kept my voice neutral. I thought it was just worthless dirt. Isn't that what you called it? Elizabeth pushed forward. Look, maybe we were a bit hasty in our judgment. Obviously, Gran had her reasons for the way she divided things. Perhaps we should discuss combining our inheritances? A partnership of sorts. I thought about all the times they'd excluded me from family events, the snide remarks about my career choices, the way they'd manipulated my father. A partnership, like the kind of partnership you've shown me these past 12 years. That's all in the past, Elizabeth waved dismissively. We're talking about the future now, my business acumen combined with your land. It makes perfect sense. Actually, I pulled out the morning's paper, showing them the headline about a major oil discovery in the region. I've already entered into a partnership. Pioneer Oil made quite an attractive offer. Marianne's smile faltered. You can't be serious. You need to discuss these decisions with family first. Family? I raised an eyebrow. Like how you discussed manipulating the will reading with my father? Or how Elizabeth discussed selling Gran's antiques before she was even buried. That's different. Elizabeth snapped, her composed facade cracking. You don't know anything about business. You'll ruin this opportunity. I opened my office door, revealing the team of executives waiting inside. I think you'll find I know quite a bit about business. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting about my worthless inheritance. Your father will hear about this, Marianne threatened. Yes, he will, I agreed. In fact, he's in that meeting. Turns out, when I told him about Gran's letter and Grandpa's surveys, he was very interested in being part of this project. He's been quite curious about why you insisted he skip the will reading. The color drained from Marianne's face as my father appeared in the doorway. His expression hardened as he looked at his wife, years of manipulation suddenly clear to him. Marianne Elizabeth, he said coldly, I believe it's time we had a family discussion about honesty and respect. But right now, my daughter has an important business meeting. As they left, Elizabeth turned back, her face a mix of anger and disbelief. This isn't fair. That property was supposed to be worthless. Life rarely gives us what we think we deserve, I replied, remembering Gran's words. Sometimes it gives us exactly what we've earned. The meeting went perfectly. By the end of the day, I had signed a contract that would not only preserve the farmland's natural beauty, but would also generate more wealth than Elizabeth's beachfront property could make in 100 years. That evening, I visited Gran's grave, placing fresh flowers by her headstone. You knew all along, didn't you? I whispered. You and Grandpa both knew exactly what you were doing. I could almost hear her gentle laugh, see the twinkle in her eye as she shared her favorite saying one last time. Patience reveals what greed conceals. As I drove home past the farmland, watching the sunset paint the fields in gold, I realized Gran had left me more than just oil-rich land. She'd given me the chance to show Elizabeth and Marianne that true value isn't always visible at first glance, whether in property or in people. The real question was, what would I do with this newfound power? The transformations that followed were far more satisfying than any revenge could have been. The first change came at home. My father finally saw Marianne and Elizabeth's true colors. The carefully crafted manipulations they'd built over years crumbled in the face of undeniable evidence. I've been such a fool, Dad said one evening as we sat on the old porch swing at the farmhouse, which I decided to restore rather than demolish. All these years, I let them convince me they had everyone's best interests at heart. The divorce papers were already filed. Marianne's attempts to claim a portion of the oil profits had been swiftly dismissed by the courts, especially after evidence emerged of her attempting to manipulate the will reading. Elizabeth's beachfront property dreams weren't faring much better. The real estate market had taken an unexpected downturn, and the property taxes were proving more than she could handle. Her social media posts about being a successful property mogul grew increasingly desperate. But I didn't feel the satisfaction they expected me to. Instead, I thought about Gran's other lessons, the ones about grace and wisdom. One morning, I received a surprising visit from Elizabeth. Gone was the designer wardrobe and superior attitude. She looked tired, worn down by reality. "I'm selling the beach house," she admitted, staring into her coffee cup. "I can't afford the maintenance, and no one's renting at the prices I need." I watched her for a moment, remembering Gran's words about how victory without compassion is hollow. "I might have a proposition for you," I said carefully. Elizabeth looked up, suspicion warring with hope in her eyes. "The oil company wants to develop an eco-resort on part of the property," I explained. "Something sustainable, showcasing both the natural beauty and the responsible energy development. It needs someone with hospitality experience to manage it." "Are you offering me a job?" she asked incredulously. "I'm offering you a chance," I corrected. "Not because we're family, but because despite everything, I think you're capable of more than what Marianne taught you to be." The resort project became our common ground. Elizabeth's experience in hospitality, freed from Marianne's toxic influence, actually proved valuable. Slowly, tentatively, we built a working relationship that might someday even become a real sisterhood. Marianne, of course, was livid. "You're choosing her over me?" she screeched at Elizabeth during one of her dramatic appearances. "After everything I taught you." "That's exactly why," Elizabeth replied, finally standing up to her mother. "Everything you taught me about manipulating people, about taking what we want, it only led to misery. Olivia's showing me there's another way." The farmland flourished under the careful development plan we created. The oil extraction used the latest environmental protection methods, leaving most of the surface untouched. We converted the old barn into a visitor center, displaying Grandpa's surveys and Gran's gardening tools, telling their love story alongside the land's history. Dad found healing there too, spending weekends helping restore the old farmhouse. "Your mother loved this place," he said one day as we planted a new vegetable garden. "She always said you had her spirit, seeing the beauty in things others overlooked." A year after the oil discovery, I stood in Gran's restored garden, watching families tour the educational center we built. Elizabeth was in her element, explaining our sustainable development practices to visitors. She'd found her own path, separate from Marianne's influence. I pulled out Gran's letter, worn now from many readings. "Patience reveals what greed conceals" had turned out to be more than just advice about the oil. It was a lesson about people too, about giving them time to reveal their true selves, for better or worse. The land had given us more than wealth. It had given us clarity. Marianne's true nature was exposed, Elizabeth found redemption, and I discovered strength I never knew I had. Dad joined me in the garden, carrying Gran's old watering can. "She would be proud," he said softly, "not just of what you did with the land, but how you did it." I smiled, looking out over the fields where Grandpa had once walked, methodically documenting what lay beneath. The greatest treasure wasn't the oil. It was the wisdom my grandparents had passed down, waiting for the right moment to bloom. "The land speaks to those who listen," I murmured, repeating Gran's words. Now I understood she hadn't just been talking about oil or farming. She'd been teaching me about patience, about looking deeper than the surface, and about the kind of person I wanted to be. As the sun set over the flourishing fields, I knew that some inheritances aren't measured in money or property. They're measured in the wisdom we choose to embrace and the grace we choose to show, even to those who may not seem to deserve it. That was Gran's true legacy, and it was worth more than all the oil in the world.